Happy Friday. Happy All Things Advocacy, January 27th, 2023. As always, Josh Askvig, State Director with AARP, Janelle Most, Advocacy Director. Janelle,
Hey,
it's the end of January.
yes,
Almost.
almost. So
Almost
so
the end of
close,
January.
so close.
It's part of it. Well, first of all, for those of you watching online and seeing it, you probably saw the beautiful new cover that we had for the introduction of All Things Advocacy. And that was because we kind of had a huge week this week in terms of AARP in general. As part of it, we had people and red shirts back in the Capitol this week.
Yeah,
So
60,
60.
60 actual people and shirts were in the Capitol. And last session it was super quiet at the Capitol because it was a year of COVID, and so we had a lot of restrictions. But this year was the first time we were able to bring back volunteers, and they had a blast being at the Capitol with us on Tuesday.
And we had a blast with them at the Capitol as well. It was so good to see our volunteers back out. I have heard from various legislators. I'm sure you have as well. I know the rest of our team, all of our staff team was up there, heard from legislators about who are all these people in red shirts? What are they doing here? And what's going on today, Josh, as part of it? And so it was, I can't say it enough. And I know I've heard from a couple of our volunteers that regularly volunteer with us that they appreciated the opportunity to come in and be a part of it. What happened? Let's tell people a little bit about what Advocacy Day was about and about what they were doing there.
Well, I think we tried to demystify the process a little bit for people. I mean, so often people know the legislative session is meeting, they might see stories on the news, but to actually get there and to sit in committee hearings. So all of our volunteers really got to experience what you and I experience every day. So they got to meet with legislators, they got to sit and listen to committee hearings. Some of them actually got to sit on the House and Senate floor during the floor session. So this was a time that they really got to watch the process take place and see that it's not as scary as people think, and it really is something that we want more citizens and more folks and communities to get involved in. It's very accessible, and legislators love seeing people at the Capitol and love talking to you and hearing from you.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the two things that I took away, one of my favorite was we sent them to one committee that we thought was going to go fairly long that morning, and they wrapped up early. And I had a set of volunteers who were attending Advocacy Day come up to me and say, well, now what do I do? And I said, well, you either find another committee that you're interested in and go sit in on that, or you can hang out here and you wait. And if you see legislators walk by, you talk to them about what's on your mind. And they looked at me and they go, that just kind of seems like a lot. And I said, sometimes you're running around from thing to thing. And some days it's like today where you spend a lot of time waiting to catch people, waiting to see people and help things move. So the second thing is, I know a couple of you, maybe you're watching today, we're back up just today. I ran into a couple of folks who were with us earlier this week, and both of them came to me and said, thank you for that event. It was so good. And it got me up here and refamiliarized themselves with the process as part of it. So it was great. As a reminder, we had 4 issues. We still have 4 issues. We had 4 issues. We still have four kind of main issue areas that we're focused on. You want to just remind folks what those are and what the volunteers, the 60 folks who were with us, were talking to legislators about.
Yeah, number one priority obviously is lowering the cost of medicine. That was, something that our volunteers really talked to their legislators a little bit about while they were there. The other thing is keeping you at home in your community longer. So looking at ways to support, home and community-based services, other additional resources that you can have to make sure that you can live where you want to live as you age. Fraud. We know a lot of folks are victims of fraud. We wanted to really talk with them about that. And the last one's really about pensions or retirement benefits, making sure that benefits that folks have earned, are there now and into the future. So those are our 4 big priorities that we're really still focused on now.
Yeah, and it was very clear having conversations with legislators after everybody was here for Advocacy Day on Tuesday that message got delivered, because they said we clearly know what's on the minds of older North Dakotans as part of it. So if you were able to join us, thanks again for joining us. If you weren't able to join us, there are still ways you can have an impact on the legislative process. Make sure you're reaching out to your local legislators. If you need help with figuring out who those folks are, reach out to Janelle or myself or anyone on the AARP North Dakota team. We can help you get that information and figure it out, because whether you were with us on Tuesday or you can come hang out with us some other day during the legislative session, or you can't, but you can still talk to your legislators from home. It's great opportunity, and really encourage you to do that. with that, let's maybe jump into some of the issue areas. I know you outlined the 4 buckets. We had kind of 3 of them top of mind this week as part of it. And the first one is, I think we have some real progress and some real momentum behind setting up an investment fraud victims compensation restitution fund. And so maybe just talk about what happened this week on that one.
Yeah, that started our week off. So we started off with a conversation with a committee about, how many North Dakotans are often victims of financial crimes. And we want to make sure that we know that this won't make victims whole, but this is a step in the right direction that, we can start to really shine a brighter light on that financial crime. We know, a lot of victims lose hundreds of thousands of dollars. This will create a process where, if a crime has been committed, it's prosecuted, we make sure that victims have a chance to get restitution. Again, it won't make you whole, but it'll give them a step in the right direction to recover some of the funds that they might have lost due to financial crimes.
Yeah, and I think the key point to just remind our viewers and folks interested in this is this current funding mechanism that we're working on, the investment fraud victim restitution fund, is just related to that, very strictly, narrowly constructed to only impact victims of investment fraud as part of it. We've had a great time working with the Securities Commissioner, Karen Tyler, and her team as part of it. And so we're looking forward to getting this stood up and seeing how it works, and then hopefully in the future expanding it maybe a little bit broader, or finding other mechanisms to cover other types of fraud, identity theft, et cetera. But it's important, and it's been super helpful to have you all telling your stories and talking about what older North Dakotans see sometimes on a daily basis of bad actors and criminals trying to defraud people of their finances. So I think that's great. I know there's more coming on that next week, and we'll talk about that in a minute. The other, I would say probably the biggest issue, and it's very clear that this issue is going to be one of what I would say a handful of issues that I would call are kind of front and center on every legislator's mind. It doesn't matter what committee they sit on. You know this. For our viewers who don't know this, there's oftentimes, you don't talk to certain legislators just because you don't end up in their committee on it. But there are these issues that kind of cut across all committees. Everybody's aware of the discussions that are going on as part of it. And it's the issue around public employee pensions, or PERS, the Public Employee Retirement System, and about trying to make sure, as you so appropriately framed it in outlining one of our priorities, making sure that benefits owed get paid, and then also looking out longer term about how do we ensure retirement security for all folks, and how do we do it in a way that's going to actually be fiscally responsible and sustainable for the state of North Dakota. There was work yesterday on that. This morning we had specifically a bill that we testified on, and in the middle of that hearing, another committee was working on a different bill related to this. So there was a ton of work. Maybe you want to kind of just summarize it up for this week.
Yeah, there's 3 bills in particular that we're watching this session related to PERS, or the pension fund, and one of them was heard this morning, and that one keeps the benefits intact. So looking at defined benefit, keeping that system intact, making it whole in terms of the funding. And that's a bill that we support, because we're currently concerned about retirees that are in the system right now, or future retirees, making sure that the benefits that they've earned are there and sustained in the long term. So the bill 2239 was heard this morning in state and local governments on the Senate side, and it had a really good hearing. But that's just one. And then there's 2 other bills on the House side. One was studied during the interim, House Bill 1040, that closes and really all but ends the defined benefit plan and moves to a defined contribution. And then there's another bill. So you've got 2 competing bills on the House side. You've got one on the Senate side. So again, legislators are hearing this on both sides of the chamber. Yep. There's different conversations happening. One, there's a really strong momentum around keeping the current system intact. And there's another really strong contingent saying we need to move in a different direction. People want other options for retirement. And so we're there, with a number of other partner groups saying this is important. Current retirees, we're concerned about them, and the ones that are moving into retirement. So this is a topic that I think will keep us here, quite late into the session, and something that every legislator is asking good questions about and trying to figure out where they stand on the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that cuts across all 3 of those bills as part of it. And we'll probably spend some time as the session goes on talking more about the details of each of those just a little bit. But what's clear is there is a growing consensus that the state needs to take some sort of action to ensure that right now the fund that is there to pay retiree benefits is at about 60% of the funding needed to pay the benefits that it would be owed and has accrued. And that has a lot of problems related to ensuring that those who are drawing retirement benefits would continue to see their benefits paid out. It also has concerns about those near retirement and what that would look like as part of it. And a lot of this goes back almost 15 years to the financial meltdown in the late 2008, 2009 timeframe as part of it. So a lot more to come on that, but that is an issue front and center. I just remind folks, we're looking at this not just for the folks in the state employee retirement system, but also for folks across the state of North Dakota. We believe in retirement security for everybody and don't believe that taking away from somebody. And it also just makes sense. A lot of rural communities receive a lot of dollars that get spent in their communities from those defined benefit plans as part of it. So lastly, this week, just quickly, two major budget areas that we watch and pay attention. And I think it was Wednesday. I don't remember. This week's kind of all blurred together for me, probably even more so for you, Janelle. Wednesday, you were in one Senate Appropriations subcommittee. I was in another Senate Appropriations subcommittee weighing in on some important issues. So you maybe just want to talk about those.
Yep. So sandwiched in between policy, we talk money too. So money, money often gets a lot of attention. The hearings are not as entertaining sometimes if you're not a really big numbers person. But yeah, so I was in the Attorney General's budget, watching that budget. Two things that we look for in particular in the Attorney General's budget is making sure that funds for the Consumer Fraud Protection Division, again, we really work in partnership with them and making sure if you are a victim of consumer fraud, you have some place to report it, and then those cases get investigated and prosecuted. So we look at that. There's also funding in there for the Medicaid fraud unit. So that was started at several sessions back. We were the last state to have a Medicaid fraud unit, and they're doing such good work now. They need additional resources, more people to help them on the ground, look at cases of the elder abuse, but also looking at that Medicaid fraud investigation. So that's where I was. I was in the Attorney General budget, but you were on the Department of Human Services side.
Yeah. So the Department of Human Services is it's actually the Department of Health and Human Services now. Last session they combined those two agencies into one agency. The budgets are still split out. I won't go into the details why. It doesn't matter. But within the Department of Human Services part of that budget, there's a number of programs under the Division of Aging Services, also under Medicaid, also under other parts of the Department of Human Services that support what you have told us you want and what you really want to see, which is additional supports and resources and staffing to help you remain safe and independent in your communities for as long as you can. And for too long, the state of North Dakota has been, I think, heavily weighted towards providing long-term care only in nursing home settings or institutionalized settings. And there's certainly a reason for nursing homes and institutions, but it shouldn't be your only choice. And so we were supporting a number of things, including meals, senior meal programs and congregate meal settings, home delivered meals. We were supporting additional state aid for folks to be able to receive long-term care services at home, to get companionship for long-term care needs at home. The companionship meaning we know social isolation is a real issue for older adults. And so making sure they have folks who can come visit them, help check on them, make sure they're doing okay, and provide some of that socialization. And then last but certainly not least, supports for those 68,000 unpaid family caregivers who do such a labor of love in the state of North Dakota, and making sure that there are resources so that when they need a break or a respite from the care that they're providing, that they have the ability to get that break needed as well. There's a number of other things we could talk about, guardianship, whatnot, but a whole bucket of things that we stood up and just said, hey, we started to move the needle in the right direction. Let's keep moving the needle in the right direction. And you really think about the progress the state of North Dakota's made, especially in the last 4 to 6 years. It's been very significant. And you're seeing in the Department of Aging Services testimony, as well as Department of Human Services overall testimony, that they're seeing caseloads go up, which might sound like a bad thing, but it's actually a good thing. It means more folks are trying to access services at home and and community-based settings. So a lot happened this week. I think we had an incredible week. I just want to give a big shout out, not only to Janelle, but also to Marnie, to Doreen, and Wendy on my team, also State President Kathy Schwann and Ellen Schaefer from our Executive Council. We had been planning Advocacy Day for over a year. We'd really been planning it in the last month, and I think we just had an incredible day. And kudos to you and your teammates and my teammates for pulling it off and having a great week overall. In addition to all of that, so kudos to that. Let's jump ahead to next week. We're kind of hitting that point of the session. The bill deadline is passed, so pretty much, well, we're not totally aware of everything yet, but most of the bills have showed up in the bill queue for us to look through and whatnot. So we're kind of in that point of the session where there's a lot of committee hearings are slowing. They're not gone yet, but they're slowing, and committee work is really ramping up next week. And I know there's kind of two things we're working on next week. The first of which is paid family leave. So you want to just touch on that quickly?
Yeah, so it's a bill we supported last legislative session, and Representative Carla Rose Hansen is introducing this bill again. And it's really just, again, having that conversation about what other supports can a state offer to folks. And paid family leave is one of them. A lot of states do have paid family leave. I think it's just introducing another concept of, this could help people stay in their community, in their home longer. How can we support families when they need that assistance? So that hearing is on Monday morning. So we plan to be there. But as you said, some of the committees are getting through their formal hearing process pretty quickly. I heard this morning there's about 13 bills left in one committee, where another committee probably has about 37 bills left. So it's different committee to committee, but often people think, well, once the committee hearing is over, well, that's done and over with. But that is just the first step in this process. And so next week, two of the committees that we're in quite a bit, Senate Human Services and Appropriations, are going to be meeting on the fraud restitution bill. So the Appropriations Committee will look at the funding that's set aside in that restitution bill. There's $1 million set aside in there out of a special fund that would be dedicated to this restitution fund. So they'll hear that on Monday as well. And then hopefully later in the week, they'll talk more about the prescription drug bill. We know that we had the hearing almost 2 weeks ago. People are thinking, well, what happened to it? Well, the committee is going to start to dig into the details and make some good decisions. Usually when ideas are out there, most often bills get amendments, changes made to it before they get voted on in committee hearings. And so you're going to see a lot of that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think we'll be back here in a week talking a lot about what happened to the prescription drug bill, where it's at, what you all need to do. And so I'd really encourage you, if you haven't, I know we've been saying this over and over again, but if you haven't reached out to your state senator specifically, I'd encourage you to do so soon. I think next week is going to be key on our prescription drug priorities, I should say. But really, Senate Bill 2031, if you need a refresher, is the bill. I know we're working on some amendments that we think would help improve it, probably address some of the questions that have been raised by antagonists as part of it. I don't think we'll fully overcome all of their objections and questions, but I think it'll be a step in the right direction as part of it, and try and help the committee get a better understanding of how we can make something workable. And really, as we have said, or at least I know I've certainly said, and I know Janelle said it, remind your senator the state has a role to play in helping bring down the cost of prescription drugs. That yes, the federal government has taken action. They continue to take, and we're going to continue to push them as well. But the state of North Dakota and North Dakota state senators and North Dakota House of Representatives and the governor eventually should and can take action to help bring down the price of prescription drugs. So more to come on that next week. On the fraud restitution one, I don't want to leave that totally. I think that I'm excited about that bill. I think it'd be a great step forward for the state of North Dakota, and excited to have the Appropriations Committee hearing. For those that have any interest in this at all, and totally inside baseball, because there is an appropriation within that bill actually has to go through 2 committee processes. But I talked to the chairman of the Senate Appropriations Committee today. He seemed to think that they just want to make sure they understand what the funding is for and how it works, but seemed very favorable about it overall. So with that, we do have action for people to take, and which is, if you were here earlier this week, or if you weren't here but wish you were and are trying to figure out how to get involved, you can always get involved by sending a note to us, reaching out at aarp.org/ndadvocacy. But we also have a specific event coming up at the end of February where we're going to go through a lot more detail on some of this stuff. Do you want to tell folks about those events?
Yeah, believe it or not, we just finished week 4 of the session. So this is about a month from now. So February 27th, mark your calendar. You know, we're going to have 4 different locations. We're calling them the legislative lowdown on February 27th. And it's really the halfway point. You know, it's called crossover. It's a time that you can meet with other volunteers in 4 different communities. You can hear from the 2 of us. You might see us in person, but you can learn more about where are our 4 priorities at that point in the session. So we'll give you updates about bills that are currently still moving through the process. It'll give you updates on the budget, but this is a great time to really, you know, dig in and find out more, just like our advocates did, you know, earlier this week. Find out more about the session, what to expect on the second half, and things and ways that you can get involved to stay focused through the end of the session.
Yeah, absolutely. So those 4 events, all the same day, all at the exact same time. Bismarck, there's Bismarck location, a Minot location, a Fargo, technically West Fargo location, and a Grand Forks location. So if you're in those communities, great. If you're near those communities, awesome. And if not, we encourage you, if you can make it to one of them, to do that. We'll serve you lunch and do that. It's the ARP North Dakota Legislative Lowdown, February 27th from 11:30 to 1 o'clock. You can see likely on your screen how to register for each of those locations there as part of it. We're excited about it. Looking forward to joining you. So with that, Janelle, anything else we didn't cover or we need to cover before we get out of here?
No, just thanks again for everybody that joined us. You know, it was great to see folks in the Capitol in those red shirts. I still heard from another legislator today. Now, where were all those people from? So they were really super excited to hear that there were people from all over the state that were here engaged in the process. So stay engaged. Just because that one day you were here, we want you to still continue to check in with us, and we can give you other opportunities to stay engaged with your legislators through the session.
Absolutely. I just want to again say thanks to those who made it. Thanks to my team as part of it. I think it was again, as Janelle has so eloquently said, great. But don't let your foot off the gas. To use a racing metaphor, let's keep the pressure on and make sure that those issues that you care about and are impacted, that the legislature takes action on them. So with that, Janelle Mose, our Advocacy Director for ARP. I'm Josh Askvig, State Director for ARP North Dakota, and this has been another All Things Advocacy.